3 months ago, I died in a tragic hiking accident at Cascade Falls. At least, that's what my sister Diana told everyone. The reality was far more complicated and much darker. I watched a local news report from a motel room 50 miles outside of Seattle, my coffee growing cold as the anchor solemnly described my fatal fall. Sarah Mitchell, 32, was reported missing after failing to return from a solo hiking trip, the anchor read. After an extensive 3-day search, authorities discovered signs of a tragic accident near the upper falls. While no body has been recovered, experts believe survival would have been impossible given the conditions. The camera cut to Diana, her perfect face streaked with artfully applied tears. "She was my best friend," she sobbed. "My only sister. I can't believe she's gone." I turned off the TV, my hands shaking with anger. Best friend. Right? That would be why she'd taken out a $5 million life insurance policy on me 2 months before my accident. The truth was, I hadn't been anywhere near Cascade Falls that day. I'd been in my Seattle apartment, preparing for a business trip to Phoenix, when I got the call that changed everything. "Ms. Mitchell." The voice had been professional, cautious. "This is Agent Cooper with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Do you have a moment to discuss your sister, Diana Mitchell?" That call had saved my life, because Agent Cooper had evidence that Diana had been planning my death for months. Bank records showing massive debt. A newly purchased life insurance policy with herself as sole beneficiary. Suspicious internet searches about untraceable poisons and accidents that look natural. "We believe your sister may be planning to harm you," Agent Cooper had said. "We need your help to catch her before she succeeds." And so began my death. A carefully orchestrated disappearance, staged to look exactly like what Diana had been planning. The FBI had helped me vanish, leaving just enough evidence at Cascade Falls to make my accident convincing. For 3 months, I'd watched from the shadows as Diana played her role perfectly. The grieving sister, devastated by loss, but bravely carrying on. She'd even started a foundation in my name, though I had no doubt where that money was really going. Now, sitting in my motel room with case files spread across the bed, I was finally ready to come back to life. The insurance company deposited the funds this morning, Agent Cooper confirmed over the phone. $5 million, straight into her account. We have the transfer records, and the foundation donations, already traced to offshore accounts. Your sister's been busy. I picked up a photo taken just yesterday, Diana at a luxury car dealership, writing a check for a new Mercedes, grieving in style. "The funeral's tomorrow," I said. "Everything ready?" "Teams are in position. Just remember to wait for my signal before you make your entrance." I smiled, thinking of Diana's face when she saw me. "Oh, don't worry. I want this to be perfect." Perfect, like Diana had always been. Perfect grades, perfect hair, perfect life. While I was the awkward one, the plain one, the one who had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Our parents' death 5 years ago had only widened the gap. Diana had gotten the lion's share of the inheritance naturally. The golden child. I'd gotten just enough to start my own business. A small tech consulting firm that had finally started to become successful. Too successful, apparently. Diana had borrowed heavily against her inheritance, making risky investments that didn't pay off. By the time she took out the life insurance policy on me, she was nearly bankrupt. I'd never seen it coming. That's what hurt the most. Even knowing how shallow she was, how self-centered, I'd never imagined she'd try to kill her own sister for money. A knock at my motel room door made me jump. Agent Cooper stood outside, a garment bag over her arm. "Thought you might want to dress appropriately for your own funeral," she said, hanging the bag on the door. Inside was a sleek black dress, elegant but understated, perfect for a ghost returning to haunt her killer. "The wire's built into the neckline," Cooper explained. "Completely invisible, but it'll pick up everything. And the cameras." She handed me a pair of designer sunglasses. "Built in. Everything will be recorded from your perspective." I tried them on, studying my reflection. With my dark hair pulled back severely and dramatic makeup, I barely recognized myself. Good. The less I looked like the old Sarah, the more dramatic the reveal would be. "Your sister hired someone to help stage the accident," Cooper said, watching me prepare. "A local guide who was supposed to verify seeing you on the trail that day. He rolled over on her as soon as we showed him the evidence. His testimony alone would convict her." "But that's not enough, is it?" I turned from the mirror. "You want her to confess. On camera, wearing a wire, with 50 witnesses." Cooper nodded. "No wiggle room. No legal gray areas. Just pure, incontrovertible proof of premeditated fraud and attempted murder." I thought of all the times Diana had overshadowed me, dismissed me, treated me like an afterthought in her perfect life. Tomorrow, she'd learn just how big a mistake she'd made in underestimating me. "Get some sleep," Cooper advised. "Tomorrow's going to be intense." But sleep was impossible. I spent the night reviewing the evidence, making sure every detail was perfect. Bank statements showing the money trail. Emails between Diana and the guide discussing the accident. The life insurance policy, taken out with forged signatures and backdated documents. Most damning of all were the text messages we'd recovered from Diana's cloud backup. Messages to her boyfriend, Marcus, laying out the whole plan. "Sarah's finally worth more dead than alive," she'd written. "Once the insurance pays out, we'll have everything we ever wanted." Marcus, to his credit, had been horrified. He'd broken up with her immediately and gone straight to the FBI. His statement was part of the evidence package. Dawn found me still awake, watching the sun rise over the Seattle skyline. In 6 hours, I'd be attending my own funeral. In 7, my sister's life would implode. The church was one of those grand old buildings in the historic district, all Gothic spires and stained glass. Diana had chosen it for maximum dramatic effect, no doubt. The parking lot was already full when we arrived. She'd invited hundreds of people to witness her performance. "Remember," Cooper said as we parked a block away, "wait for my signal. We need her to incriminate herself before you make your entrance." I nodded, adjusting my sunglasses. Through the tiny camera, I could see the funeral guests arriving in their somber best. Many were crying. Diana had clearly sold my death well. "There she is," Cooper pointed. Diana emerged from a black limousine, stunning in designer mourning wear. Her blonde hair was artfully tousled, her makeup perfect despite the tears. She clutched Marcus's mother's arm as if she could barely walk from grief. Marcus himself was conspicuously absent. He'd refused to participate in this farce. "Audio check," a voice said in my hidden earpiece. "Testing. 1, 2. I spoke softly. "Receiving." "Cameras online," another voice confirmed. "All units in position." This was really happening. After 3 months of hiding, of watching my sister profit from my death, I was about to turn her world upside down. "You okay?" Cooper asked, noting my expression. I thought about Diana's text messages planning my murder, about the fake grief, the stolen money, the sheer calculated cruelty of it all. "I'm perfect," I said. "Let's go haunt my sister." The funeral service was exactly as grandiose as I'd expected from Diana. White lilies covered every surface, my supposed favorite flower, though she'd never bothered to learn that I actually preferred sunflowers. A massive portrait of me dominated the altar, clearly photoshopped to match Diana's preferred image of her sister. "Guest count is over 300, Agent Cooper murmured in my earpiece as we watched from our hidden position in the church's side entrance. "Your sister really went all out." "Of course she did," I whispered back. "She's playing the role of a lifetime." Through my camera-equipped sunglasses, I recorded everything. The greeting faces, many of whom I barely recognized. The expensive flower arrangements with cards proclaiming in loving memory. The donation box for the fraudulent foundation Diana had started in my name. "Target approaching microphone," another agent reported. "Showtime." Diana glided to the podium like an actress taking center stage. Her black channel dress probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. The insurance money was clearly already being put to use. "My beloved sister," she began, her voice trembling perfectly. "My Sarah. My best friend." I had to admire her performance. The slight catch in her voice, the elegant dab at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. It was masterful. "Sarah was more than just my sister," Diana continued. "She was my rock, my conscience, my greatest supporter." Through my earpiece, I heard Agent Cooper snort softly. We'd both read the text messages where Diana had called me a useless burden and plotted my death. When she went missing that day, Diana's voice broke beautifully. I knew something was wrong. Sarah was so careful, so responsible. She would never have taken risks on that trail. Actually, I was an experienced hiker who tackled much harder trails than Cascade Falls. But Diana had never bothered to learn that about me either. "The foundation we've started in her name," she went on, "will help other families dealing with similar tragedies. Already, your generous donations have made such a difference." "Money transfer confirmed," an FBI analyst reported in my earpiece. "Another 100,000 moved offshore this morning." I smiled coldly. Diana hadn't wasted any time laundering the foundation money through her network of shell companies. "I just wish," Diana dabbed her eyes again, "I just wish I'd been able to say goodbye, to tell her how much I loved her." "Target is moving to phase 2, Cooper murmured. "Get ready." Right on cue, Diana's voice strengthened with false resolve. "But Sarah wouldn't want us to dwell in sadness. She'd want us to celebrate her life. That's why, in her memory, I'm announcing a new initiative." She went on to describe an elaborate charitable program that would never exist. More ways to collect donations, more schemes to steal money in my name. "We've got it all," Cooper confirmed. "The foundation fraud, the insurance scam, everything. Time for phase 3. I watched as one of our undercover agents approached the podium, handed Diana a note. Her performance didn't slip for a second as she read it. "Oh," she said softly into the microphone. "I've just been informed that they may have found something at the falls." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was the moment Diana had planned carefully, a dramatic announcement that would cement the story of my death and eliminate any lingering questions. "The search teams," her voice shook, "they've discovered evidence, personal items that confirm." She pressed the handkerchief to her mouth. "That confirm my beloved sister is truly gone." The congregation erupted in fresh grief. Diana sank gracefully into her seat, accepting comfort from the wealthy socialites she'd invited to witness her performance. "All units in position," Cooper said tersely, waiting for the signal. I watched through my camera as Diana leaned close to one of her friends, whispering something that made them both smile slightly, probably already planning how to spend more of my insurance money. "The insurance company's fraud department is standing by," another agent reported. "They're ready to freeze the accounts on your word." Diana stood again, moving back to the podium. This was it, the final act of her performance. The part where she would give a touching speech about accepting closure and moving forward, about honoring my memory through her foundation. "Sarah would be so touched by this outpouring of love," she began. "By your generosity, your support." "Now," Cooper said firmly, "go." I took a deep breath and stepped through the side door. The first person to notice me was an elderly woman in the back row. Her gasp was audible even over Diana's speech. Then another person saw me, and another. The whispers spread like wildfire through the congregation. Diana, caught up in her performance, didn't notice at first. "And though we may never fully recover from this loss," she continued. "Diana," I said clearly, my voice carrying through the church's perfect acoustics, "I think you've recovered just fine. The new Mercedes proves that." She froze. For just a moment, her perfect mask slipped, revealing naked shock and something else, fury. Then she screamed. It wasn't the practiced, elegant cry of her performance. This was raw, primal, real. She staggered back from the podium as I walked slowly up the center aisle. "No," she whispered. "No, this isn't possible." "What's wrong, sister?" I asked pleasantly. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "You're dead," she said. "You're dead. I made sure." She cut herself off, but it was too late. The words hung in the air like a confession. "You made sure," I repeated, still advancing. "Made sure how, exactly?" "By hiring someone to verify my presence on a trail I never visited." "By forging documents?" "By planning my accident down to the last detail." "I don't know what you're talking about." She tried to recover. "Sarah, I've been so worried." "Where have you been?" "Cut the act," I said coldly. "The FBI has everything. The insurance fraud, the foundation scam, the text messages planning my murder." On cue, Agent Cooper and her team emerged from their positions around the church. Diana's eyes darted between them like a trapped animal. "This is ridiculous," she laughed nervously. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," I said, reaching the podium, "was you thinking you could get away with this." I turned to face the shocked congregation. "My sister took out a $5 million life insurance policy on me 2 months ago. She hired someone to help fake my death. She's been stealing donation money through a fraudulent foundation. And now," I smiled coldly at Diana, "now she's going to face the consequences." "You can't prove anything," she hissed. I tapped my sunglasses. "Actually, I just did. This entire conversation is being recorded, including your little slip about making sure I was dead." The color drained from her face. "Ms. Diana Mitchell," Agent Cooper stepped forward, badge displayed. "You're under arrest for insurance fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." As Cooper began reading Diana her rights, I surveyed the gathered crowd. The shocked faces, the dawning understanding, the cameras already coming out to record this spectacular moment. Diana had wanted an audience for her performance. Now she had one for her downfall. It was perfect. Diana Mitchell, how do you plead? The courtroom was packed 3 months after my funeral. Diana stood at the defendant's table, wearing a carefully chosen pale blue suit that made her look younger, more vulnerable. Her attorney had clearly coached her on appearance. Gone were the designer labels and perfect makeup. This was Diana 2.0, the misunderstood sister. Not guilty, Your Honor. I sat in the front row, directly in her line of sight. She hadn't looked at me once since being let in. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The FBI had built an airtight case. Bank records, text messages, emails, witness testimony from the guide she'd hired, and most damning of all, the video from my funeral where she'd accidentally confessed. But Diana had never admitted defeat gracefully. Her defense was creative. I had to give her that. According to her lawyer, she'd been the victim here. She claimed I had orchestrated the whole thing to frame her, that I'd faked my own death to destroy her life and steal her inheritance. The insurance policy, forged by me. The text messages, planted. The offshore accounts, must have been my doing. The prosecution calls Sarah Mitchell to the stand. I walked to the witness box, feeling Diana's eyes finally fix on me with barely concealed hatred. Ms. Mitchell, the prosecutor began, please tell us about the events leading up to your alleged death. For the next hour, I laid out the whole story. The FBI's warning, the evidence they'd shown me of Diana's planning, the careful operation to catch her in the act. And why, the prosecutor asked, did you agree to participate in this sting operation instead of simply confronting your sister? I looked directly at Diana for the first time, because I couldn't believe it was true. I needed to understand why my own sister would want me dead. Objection. Diana's lawyer shot up. Speculation about my client's intentions. Sustained, the judge ruled. The jury will disregard that last statement. But I'd seen several jurors' expressions. They'd heard what they needed to hear. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Every day revealed new details of Diana's scheme. The insurance agent testified about the forged policy documents. The hiking guide described how she paid him to lie about seeing me on the trail. Marcus, Diana's ex-boyfriend, detailed the conversations where she planned my accident. Through it all, Diana maintained her innocent act. Tears at appropriate moments. Confused looks when damning evidence was presented. Hurt glances at me, as if she couldn't understand why her beloved sister would do this to her. It might have worked, if not for the video. On the final day of testimony, the prosecution played the complete recording from my funeral. The camera in my sunglasses had captured everything in perfect clarity. Diana's performance, her shock at seeing me, and most importantly, her damning words, "You're dead, I made sure." The jury took less than 2 hours to reach a verdict. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. Diana's perfect mask cracked. On the charge of insurance fraud, we find the defendant guilty. Her fingers gripped the table until her knuckles went white. On the charge of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. A small sound escaped her, something between a gasp and a snarl. As the judge prepared to announce sentencing, Diana finally snapped. "You ruined everything," she screamed, turning to face me. "It was perfect. I had it all planned. You were supposed to die, and I was supposed to." "Ms. Mitchell," the judge thundered, "control yourself, or you will be removed." But Diana was beyond control. 20 years of carefully maintained facade crumbled in an instant. "You were nothing," she shrieked as bailiffs moved to restrain her. Just a burden. A nobody. I deserved that money. I deserved. They dragged her out, her screams echoing through the courthouse. The judge called a brief recess to restore order. Agent Cooper touched my arm. You okay? I nodded, watching the door where Diana had disappeared. I finally got my answer. About why she did it. About who she really is. I gathered my things. And who I am. The sentencing, when it came, was severe. 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder. 10 years each for the fraud charges, to be served consecutively. No possibility of parole for at least 30 years. Diana's perfect life was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Ms. Mitchell, how does it feel to send your own sister to prison? Any comment on the foundation money still missing? Will you be writing a book about your experience? I stopped at the top of the steps, considering my response carefully. My sister died long before she tried to kill me. I said finally, I just didn't want to see it. Today isn't about revenge or justice. It's about truth. And sometimes the truth hurts worse than any lie. 6 months later, I stood at Cascade Falls, watching the water thunder down. The place where I was supposed to die had become something of a tourist attraction after the trial. People took selfies, trying to spot where the accident was meant to happen. My tech consulting firm had flourished, ironically enough. The publicity from the trial had brought in new clients, people who appreciated someone who could spot complex fraud schemes. The insurance money had been returned, the foundation dissolved, and Diana's offshore accounts frozen. She'd lost everything: money, freedom, reputation. Her perfect image shattered beyond repair. I'd received a letter from her last week, the first contact since her sentencing. Just 2 lines. I would have given you half, if you just died like you were supposed to. Think about that while you enjoy your victory. I'd burned the letter without responding. Some relationships couldn't be fixed. Some betrayals went too deep. My phone buzzed, Agent Cooper, checking in as she still did occasionally. Heard from our mutual friend, she texted. Just more poison, I replied. You know, most people would be more traumatized by all this. I looked out at the falls, thinking about strength and survival and the strange ways life tests us. Most people, I texted back, haven't had to attend their own funeral. A family of hikers passed by, the children pointing excitedly at the waterfall. Their mother held their hands tightly, keeping them safe from the edge. Sisters, I noticed, about the same age difference as Diana and me. Be careful up there, I called out. The view can be deceiving. The mother smiled gratefully, pulling her girls back from the railing. They continued up the trail, their laughter carrying on the wind. I took one last look at the falls before turning away. Diana had chosen this place to end my story. Instead, it had become the beginning of a new one. My phone buzzed again. Work this time. A potential new client, worried about financial irregularities in their family business. I have some experience with that, I told them, walking back to my car. Let me show you what to look for. The sun was setting as I drove away from Cascade Falls, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. In my rearview mirror, the waterfall diminished until it was just a distant roar. Some people spend their whole lives pretending to be something they're not. Diana had pretended to be the perfect sister while plotting my death. I had pretended not to see her true nature until it almost killed me. Now we were both exactly who we were meant to be. She was inmate number 247,891, serving 30 years for trying to kill her sister. And I was alive, successful, free. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just surviving, it's thriving. As I merged onto the highway, a familiar song came on the radio, one Diana and I used to sing as children, back when we were just sisters, before money and jealousy and murder plots complicated everything. I switched it off. Some ghosts are better left unsung.
The crystal ballroom of the Rosewood Hotel sparkled with 1,000 points of light, each crystal chandelier casting rainbow prisms across the faces of elegantly dressed guests. I stood in the shadows near the entrance, watching the scene unfold before me like some bizarre theater production. The bride, my sister Olivia, floated through the crowd in her designer wedding gown, accepting congratulations with practiced grace. Our parents, George and Margaret Wilson, followed in her wake like proud satellites, their faces glowing with the kind of joy they'd never shown for me. "Just sign here, Ms. Martinez," the wedding coordinator whispered, extending a tablet with the final payment authorization for the venue. I suppressed a smile at the false name I'd used to purchase the Rosewood Hotel chain 3 years ago. If only they knew that Elena Martinez, the mysterious hotel magnate, was actually Elena Wilson, the daughter they declared dead a decade ago. I scrawled my signature and handed back the tablet, adjusting the elegant mask that covered the upper half of my face. The masquerade theme had been Olivia's idea, though I doubted she realized how perfectly it served my purpose. Behind their own masks, not even my parents recognized the daughter they'd erased. The ceremony was beautiful, I murmured to the coordinator, my voice carrying the slight Spanish accent I cultivated for my Elena Martinez persona. "Your staff has done an excellent job." She beamed at the praise, unaware that I signed her paychecks. "Thank you, Ms. Martinez. We're so honored you came personally to oversee the Wilson wedding. They're one of Boston's most prominent families, you know." I knew all too well. The Wilsons had been Boston aristocracy for generations, their shipping empire dating back to the 1800s. That legacy of success and perfection had been everything to my parents, and the reason they found it so easy to erase their defective daughter. My crime? Refusing to marry the man they'd chosen for me, the heir to a rival shipping company. At 22, fresh out of business school with dreams of modernizing the family company, I dared to suggest that arranged marriages were outdated, that maybe the shipping industry needed innovation more than it needed mergers through matrimony. The argument that followed still echoed in my nightmares. My father's rage, my mother's cold disappointment, and finally the ultimatum: marry Jonathan Porter or be cut off completely. I chose freedom. The next morning, I emptied my trust fund, a mere $50,000 they'd forgotten to freeze, and disappeared. I spent the first month in a cheap motel, teaching myself everything I could about modern business practices, digital transformation, and venture capital. I changed my appearance, adopted a new accent, and built Elena Martinez from scratch. What I didn't know then was that my parents had chosen to deal with my departure in the most dramatic way possible. Instead of admitting their daughter had defied them, they told everyone I died in a sailing accident off the coast. They even held a funeral, complete with an empty casket and tearful eulogies about their beloved Elena, taken too soon. I learned about my own death 6 months later when I tried to contact my younger sister. The email I sent bounced back, but not before I saw her social media profile picture, Olivia in black, standing beside our parents at my memorial service. That was the moment Elena Wilson truly died and Elena Martinez was born. "Ms. Martinez?" The coordinator's voice pulled me back to the present. "Would you like to be seated for dinner?" I nodded, following her to a table near the back of the ballroom. Close enough to observe everything, far enough to maintain my cover. The irony of paying for my sister's wedding venue and owning the mansion our parents still lived in wasn't lost on me. Over the past decade, I'd systematically purchased every property the Wilsons used, every hotel they frequented, and a controlling interest in most of their business partners. They just didn't know it yet. My father's voice suddenly carried across the room, loud enough to reach my table. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please." The crowd quieted as George Wilson raised his champagne glass. He cut an impressive figure in his tuxedo, silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. 10 years had added distinguished lines to his face, but hadn't diminished his commanding presence. "Today is a day of joy, celebrating the marriage of my only daughter, Olivia, to the love of her life. Only daughter. The words hit like a physical blow, even after all these years. But it's also a day tinged with bittersweetness. He continued, his voice thick with practiced emotion. I can't help but think of our beloved Elena, Olivia's sister, who left us far too soon. She would have loved to see this day. Beside him, my mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, the perfect breathing mother still mourning her lost child. If only they knew that lost child was sitting 30 feet away, controlling more wealth and power than the Wilson family had accumulated in 6 generations. A server appeared at my elbow. More champagne, Ms. Martinez? I accepted the glass, using the moment to collect myself. I hadn't come here for revenge, or at least, that's what I told myself. I'd built my empire through genuine innovation, transforming struggling businesses into modern powerhouses. The fact that I now controlled most of my family's business interests was just convenient. Such a shame about their older daughter. The elderly woman seated beside me whispered, clearly hoping to share gossip with the mysterious hotel owner. The poor girl died in a sailing accident. They say she was quite troubled before the end, defying her parents, refusing a brilliant marriage match. Some even whispered she might have, you know. She made a vague gesture. Done it on purpose. My fingers tightened around the champagne flute. Of course they'd implied my death was suicide. It fit their narrative of the rebellious daughter who couldn't handle the pressure of their expectations. Better than admitting the truth, that I'd chosen freedom over their suffocating control. The sound of clinking glass drew everyone's attention. Olivia had stood to make her own speech, her new husband beaming beside her. My little sister had grown into a stunning woman, though her beauty had a brittle quality that reminded me of our mother. Thank you all for being here today, she began, her voice carrying the same finishing school polish I'd once been forced to learn. As father said, this day is perfect in almost every way. The only thing missing is my dear sister, Elena. I took a slow sip of champagne, watching her performance. Elena was more than my big sister. She was my best friend, my protector, my role model. Olivia's voice wavered perfectly. When we were little, she used to tell me that anything was possible if you were brave enough to chase your dreams. I just wish. She paused for dramatic effect. I just wish she could see that I finally found my dream. The crowd murmured sympathetically. I fought the urge to laugh. Olivia had been 12 when I left, old enough to understand exactly what our parents had done. She'd chosen their side, happily stepping into the role of perfect only daughter. The sister who'd supposedly been her best friend hadn't even raided a phone call to warn me about my impending death. As dinner was served, I found myself studying the head table. My parents sat there with Olivia and her new husband, along with his equally wealthy family. They looked like something out of a society magazine. Perfectly groomed, perfectly poised, perfectly false. 10 years ago, their perfect facade had crushed me. Now I saw them clearly, small people desperately clinging to outdated power, unaware that the world had changed around them. The shipping industry they dominated for generations was transforming, and they hadn't adapted. Their empire was crumbling, propped up only by the secret investments I'd made through shell companies. Ms. Martinez? A man in an expensive suit approached my table. I recognized him as James Porter, my almost father-in-law, though he aged considerably. I hope you're enjoying the evening. I must say, we were surprised and honored when we heard you be attending personally. I smiled behind my mask. I make it a point to oversee special events at my flagship properties, Mr. Porter. Especially for such distinguished families. He preened at the compliment. Yes, well, the Wilsons and Porters have been pillars of Boston society for generations. Though I must admit, recent years have been challenging. Oh, I kept my tone merely polite, though I knew exactly how challenging things had been for both families. My companies had slowly acquired controlling interests in their major shipping routes, modernizing operations and squeezing their profit margins. The industry isn't what it used to be, he said, sighing heavily. These tech startups, these modern logistics companies, they're disrupting everything. Why just last month we lost our biggest client to some upstart called Phoenix Maritime. I managed not to smile. Phoenix Maritime was one of my first acquisitions, transformed from a failing local shipper into a digital logistics powerhouse. Progress can be difficult to navigate, I offered diplomatically. Progress, he scoffed. In my day, business was built on relationships, on family connections. Did you know my son was supposed to marry George Wilson's older daughter? Now that would have been a merger worth celebrating. But the girl had other ideas. He shook his head. Tragic. What happened to her? Though perhaps for the best, given her rebellious nature. The crystal flute in my hand threatened to shatter under my grip. Before I could respond, a commotion at the head table drew everyone's attention. My mother had stood up suddenly, swaying slightly. Apparently the champagne had flowed too freely. I simply must say, she announced, her voice carrying that peculiar precision of the elegantly drunk. How wonderful it is to see all our dear friends here, especially those who supported us after we lost our Elena. I sat perfectly still, watching the train wreck unfold. Such a difficult time, she continued, dabbing at her eyes. Having to tell everyone that our daughter, that she, well, the shame of it all. But we preserved the family name, didn't we, George? We gave her a proper send-off, even if she didn't deserve. Margaret. My father's voice cut through her rambling like a steel blade. Perhaps you should sit down. But the champagne had loosened something in my mother's perfect facade. Oh, but darling, I simply must tell Ms. Martinez what an honor it is to have her here. Such a successful woman, and self-made at that. Nothing at all like our poor Elena, who thought she could reject her family obligations and succeed on her own. She laughed, the sound brittle as breaking glass. As if a Wilson could ever survive without family connections. Why ever she didn't even make it a month before. That's enough. My father stood, his face flushed with anger. Margaret, you're making a scene. The ballroom had gone silent, hundreds of guests watching my mother's meltdown with horrified fascination. Olivia was hiding her face in her hands, her new husband patting her shoulder awkwardly. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. The sound drew my mother's attention, and she focused on me with the unsettling intensity of the truly drunk. Ms. Martinez, she called out, you simply must tell us your secret. How does a woman with no family name, no connections, build such an empire? My Elena thought she could do the same, you know. Thought she was smarter than generations of Wilson business sense. And now she's what, mother? The words left my mouth before I could stop them, my careful accent slipping. My mother froze, something flickering across her face. Recognition, impossible as it was. But the moment passed. She blinked at me owlishly, confused by the question from a stranger. My father had reached her by then, taking her arm firmly. I apologize for my wife, he said smoothly, the excitement of the day combined with the memories. Please, everyone, enjoy your dinner. He led my mother away, probably to sleep off the champagne in one of the hotel's luxury suites. Suites I owned in a hotel I owned, just like I owned the mansion they still lived in and controlling interest in the companies they thought were still theirs. I sank back into my chair, hands trembling slightly. I come too close to revealing myself, letting old pain override a decade of careful planning. The elderly woman beside me patted my arm sympathetically. Don't mind them, dear, she said. Old money families like the Wilsons, they can't handle change. Today's world belongs to people like you, self-made, forward-thinking. Why, I heard your hotel chain is expanding into shipping and logistics now. Among other things, I murmured, recovering my accent. She had no idea that my hotel chain was just the tip of the iceberg. Through various shell corporations and holding companies, Elena Martinez controlled an empire worth billions, built specifically to systematically dismantle everything the Wilsons had ever valued. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of small talk and subtle observation. I watched my sister dance with her new husband, my father smooth things over with embarrassed guests, my mother nowhere to be seen. They looked exactly like what they were, relics of a dying era, clinging to appearances while their real power slipped away. When I finally stood to leave, the wedding coordinator rushed over. Ms. Martinez, will you be staying the night? We've prepared the presidential suite. No, I said quietly, watching my father lead a round of toasts. I think I've seen enough family drama for one evening. She laughed nervously, clearly uncertain how to respond to her boss's dry tone. I handed her a thick envelope, a wedding gift for my sister, though she'd never know who it was really from. Make sure the bride and groom have everything they need, I instructed, and send some water and a spear into Mrs. Wilson's room. She'll need it tomorrow. As I walked out of the crystal ballroom, I heard my father's voice one last time, to family, the most precious thing we have. I didn't turn around. Elena Wilson was dead, after all. They'd made sure of that themselves. But Elena Martinez was very much alive, and she was just getting started. In my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed my assistant. Maya, execute phase 2. It's time the Wilsons learned exactly who they're dealing with. The next few weeks would change everything. But that's another part of the story. The morning after Olivia's wedding, I sat in my penthouse office overlooking Boston Harbor, watching the Wilson shipping vessels crawl across the water like tiny, obsolete insects. My mother's drunken outburst had accelerated my timeline, but perhaps that was for the best. 10 years of silent accumulation had positioned all the pieces perfectly. Now it was time to play the game. The numbers are in from last night, Maya announced, entering with her tablet. My assistant of 8 years was the only person who knew both Elena Martinez and Elena Wilson. The Wilson-Porter wedding cost them just over $300,000. They put it all on credit. I nodded, unsurprised. And their current financial position? Critical. Maya pulled up detailed spreadsheets. Wilson Shipping's quarterly losses have hit $12 million. They've mortgaged everything they own, which technically means they've mortgaged everything you own since you hold all their properties through shell companies. They're 3 months behind on payments to Phoenix Maritime, which means they're 3 months behind on payments to me. I finished. What about the Porter merger they're counting on? James Porter's company isn't in much better shape. The merger would be like tying 2 stones together and expecting them to float. I smiled, remembering James Porter's condescending comments at the wedding. The man who'd once thought himself worthy of arranging my marriage was now drowning in debt, his company hemorrhaging clients to my more efficient operations. Send notices to all their major clients, I instructed. It's time for Phoenix Maritime to raise its rates. Let's see how many stay loyal to outdated shipping methods when modern logistics could save them millions. Maya made a note, then hesitated. There's something else. Your father has called an emergency board meeting for Wilson Shipping tomorrow morning. Finally, I've been waiting for this moment, carefully orchestrating it through a decade of strategic moves. Prepare the paperwork. It's time for Elena Martinez to make her first public appearance at Wilson Shipping. Are you sure? Maya's concern was evident. Once you start this. They buried their daughter to save face, I said quietly. Now they'll learn exactly what that decision cost them. The next morning, I dressed with particular care, a blood-red Armanis suit that projected power, Louboutin heels that clicked like weapons on marble floors, and a small gold compass pendant that had once belonged to my grandmother. The only Wilson who had truly loved me. The Wilson Shipping headquarters hadn't changed in 10 years. The same imposing granite building, the same brass nameplate declaring founded 1847. The same portrait of my great-grandfather glowering in the lobby. But there was an undercurrent of tension today, nervous whispers and darting glances as employees noticed my arrival. Ms. Martinez. The receptionist jumped to attention. We weren't expecting. That is, the board meeting is private. Not anymore. I handed her a thick envelope. My credentials. As the majority shareholder of Phoenix Maritime and holder of significant Wilson Shipping debt, I have every right to attend. Her hands shook as she verified the paperwork. I watched her face pale as she realized exactly how much power Elena Martinez wielded. Of course. 14th floor boardroom. The elevator ride gave me a moment to center myself. In my ear, Maya's voice provided updates through a discreet earpiece. All board members present. Your father's trying to push through an emergency restructuring plan. He still thinks he can save the company without outside help. The boardroom doors were heavy oak, stretching from floor to ceiling. I paused for a moment, hearing familiar voices through the wood. Can't accept these terms, my father was saying. Phoenix Maritime is trying to steal our company piece by piece. We don't have a choice, George, another voice responded. We're bleeding clients, our ships are outdated, and this mysterious Elena Martinez owns half the ports we use. I pushed the doors open. The conversation died instantly. 12 men in expensive suits stared at me. Old money, old power, old ideas. At the head of the table, my father stood frozen mid-gesture, his face darkening as he recognized the woman who'd attended his daughter's wedding. Ms. Martinez, he managed finally. This is a private meeting. Not anymore. I strode to the table, my heels echoing in the silence. Please don't let me interrupt your discussion of my company's terms. Your company? He spat the words. Phoenix Maritime is nothing but an upstart using digital gimmicks to steal established clients. Wilson Shipping has survived for 6 generations and will survive for precisely 12 more days. I cut in smoothly. Unless you accept the merger terms I'm about to offer. I placed a folder on the table. Inside was the culmination of 10 years' work. Documents proving my ownership of their buildings, their warehouses, their homes. Evidence of their mounting debts, their failed modernization attempts, their desperate efforts to maintain appearances while their empire crumbled. "This is impossible," my father whispered, flipping through pages. "These properties, our house, the hotel chain, all belong to me," I confirmed, "along with controlling interest in most of your remaining clients' companies. Face it, Mr. Wilson, you're not just losing, you've already lost." He slammed the folder down. "Who are you? Some tech billionaire trying to dismantle a legacy business. You have no idea what family tradition means." I felt my carefully constructed mask crack, just a little. Family tradition. I took off my designer sunglasses, meeting his eyes directly. Like the tradition of forcing your children into loveless marriages, or the tradition of declaring them dead when they refuse to comply. The color drained from his face. "No," he whispered. "It's not possible." Elena, one of the older board members, breathed, recognition dawning. "My God, Elena Wilson." I smiled, not pleasantly. "Elena Martinez, actually. I took the name after you killed me. Makes for a better corporate image than being the dead daughter of a failing shipping magnate." Chaos erupted in the boardroom. Board members shouted questions. My father stumbled back into his chair, and somewhere in the building, an emergency alarm began to wail. "Enough." My voice cut through the noise like a whip. "You have exactly 24 hours to accept the merger proposal. If you refuse, I call in all outstanding debts and sell your remaining assets to my subsidiaries. Your choice." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and father, you might want to check on mother. I hear she's still recovering from quite a spectacle at Olivia's wedding." Security guards burst in as I walked out, responding to some panic button my father had probably pressed. I smiled at them as I passed. They worked for me too, though they didn't know it yet. In the elevator, Maya's voice came through my earpiece. "Well, that was dramatic." "They always love theatrics," I replied. "I learned from the best. Your mother's waiting in the lobby." I stiffened. "What?" "She arrived about 5 minutes ago. Looks like she's mostly recovered from the champagne." The elevator doors opened and there she was. Margaret Wilson, Boston society matron. Perfectly coiffed even in the middle of her world collapsing. She stood near the great-grandfather's portrait, and for a moment I saw myself at 18, standing in that same spot while she lectured me about family duty. "Ms. Martinez," she said as I approached, her voice brittle as frozen glass. Or should I say, "Elena will do." I cut her off. "But only in private. Publicly, I'm still very much dead. Your choice, as I recall." She flinched. "We did what we had to do. For the family name." "The family name?" I laughed, the sound echoing off marble walls. "Take a look around, mother. The Wilson name isn't worth the brass it's engraved on. The only thing keeping this company afloat is my money, which makes it my name on the line. You're enjoying this," she accused. "Destroying everything we built." "No." I stepped closer, close enough to smell her familiar perfume. "I'm saving everything you destroyed. The company will survive, modernize, grow. The Wilson name will continue, just not in Wilson hands." Her perfectly painted lips trembled. We really thought you were dead, poverty-stricken, failed," I supplied. "You thought your rebellious daughter couldn't possibly succeed without the family's help. That's why you erased me, because the alternative was admitting you might be wrong." A tear slipped down her cheek, carving a path through expensive foundation. "Elena, please. We can fix this. Come home." "I'm not that naive girl anymore." I walked past her toward the entrance. "You have 24 hours to accept the merger. Don't worry, I'll let you keep the house. Consider it a wedding gift to Olivia." Outside, my driver held the car door. Boston's summer sun felt warm on my face, so different from the artificial chill of the Wilson building. I looked back once, seeing my mother's silhouette through the glass doors, small and lost in the lobby of her crumbling empire. Maya was waiting in the car. "Phase 2 complete," she reported. "The board is in chaos. Our lawyers are standing by. and rumors already spreading through the financial district. What's our next move? I checked my phone, seeing dozens of missed calls from my father, from board members, from family friends, suddenly realizing who Elena Martinez really was. Let them talk. Let them panic. The next 24 hours would determine the fate of everything they built, and everything I built to replace it. Now, I said, we wait, and then we show them exactly what the dead daughter can do. The next phase would change everything. But that's another part of the story. The 24 hours I'd given the Wilson Shipping Board felt like the longest of my life. I spent them in my penthouse office, watching the sun set and rise again over Boston Harbor while my phone lit up with increasingly desperate messages. From my father, "We need to talk. This isn't the way." From various board members, "Let's discuss terms privately." From family friends, "Elena, darling, we never believed." From Olivia, surprisingly, "Is it really you?" I answered none of them. Instead, I focused on the final pieces of my plan, making sure every detail was perfect. The media had already caught wind of the story. Boston's supposedly dead heiress returning as a billionaire CEO to take over her family's company. The headlines wrote themselves. The Wall Street Journal is on line 1, Maya announced, entering with fresh coffee. They want an exclusive. Not yet. I took the coffee, breathing in its familiar comfort. Let them speculate for now. The real story comes after the board's decision. And if they refuse the merger? I smiled, remembering my mother's face in the lobby. They won't. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from the board's secretary. The vote was in. Unanimous acceptance of Phoenix Maritime's merger terms. My father hadn't even voted against it. Perhaps he finally recognized the inevitable. Set up the press conference. I told Maya. 2 hours, main lobby of Wilson Shipping. Tell them Elena Martinez will be making a major announcement. And Elena Wilson. I touched the compass pendant at my neck, thinking of my grandmother. She's done hiding. The lobby was packed by the time I arrived. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashed, and a crowd of Wilson Shipping employees lined the balconies above. My father stood with the board members on a small stage, looking like he aged a decade overnight. I made them wait 10 minutes, a small petty pleasure, but I'd earned it. When I finally walked in, the crowd fell silent. I wore Wilson blue today, a power suit that matched the company's logo, with my grandmother's compass catching the light. No more hiding behind sunglasses or Spanish accents. Thank you all for coming, I began, stepping to the podium. My name is Elena Martinez, or as some of you might remember, Elena Wilson. The room erupted. Cameras clicked frantically, reporters shouted questions, and somewhere in the crowd, I heard my mother gasp. I held up a hand for silence. 10 years ago, the Wilson family announced my tragic death, a sailing accident off the coast. The truth is somewhat less dramatic. I simply refused an arranged marriage and left to build my own life. My parents, finding this embarrassing, chose to bury an empty casket rather than admit their daughter had defied them. My father stepped forward, face dark with anger, but security, my security, held him back. In the decades since, I continued. I built what they said was impossible. Phoenix Maritime revolutionized shipping logistics, embracing modern technology while companies like Wilson Shipping clung to outdated methods. We grew rapidly, acquiring ports, properties, and clients, including many former Wilson assets. I turned to face the board members directly. Today, I'm announcing the merger of Wilson Shipping with Phoenix Maritime. The Wilson name will continue, but the company will be completely restructured. All current board members will be retiring with generous compensation packages. More chaos, more shouted questions. I noticed Olivia slip into the back of the room, still in her honeymoon tan, watching with wide eyes. And now, I said, I'll take questions. Ms. Wilson, did your family know you were alive? No, they were quite committed to my death. Ms. Martinez, how did you build your empire? The same way I would have modernized Wilson Shipping, had I been allowed, by understanding that tradition without innovation is just slow decay. Mr. Wilson, your response to your daughter's return? My father stepped forward, and for a moment I saw something crack in his proud facade. Alana, we thought. You thought I'd fail. I finished for him. That's the problem, father. You never saw who I really was. He aged another decade before my eyes. We did what we thought was right. No, I corrected quietly. You did what was easy. Erasing you was easier than admitting I might have had better ideas. Declaring me dead was easier than explaining why I left. Even now, giving up control is easier than watching your company collapse under its own weight. Elena, my mother's voice, somewhere in the crowd. Please. I ignored her, addressing the reporters again. The merged company will retain the Wilson name out of respect for its history. But make no mistake, this is a complete transformation. We're moving into the future, whether the old guard likes it or not. More questions flew, but my attention was caught by Olivia pushing through the crowd. She looked different from the polished bride of 2 days ago, younger somehow, more like the sister I remembered. You were there, she said, reaching the stage. At my wedding. You watched us all. Pretend to mourn me. I raised an eyebrow. Yes. I knew. Her voice dropped so only I could hear. Sometimes I'd look at old pictures and think I saw you in the background. At charity events, business functions, I thought I was going crazy. You aren't. Why didn't you tell me? Back then, when they first. Would you have kept my secret? I studied her face, seeing the answer. No, you were always their perfect daughter. The one who'd never disobey. She flinched. I was 12. Old enough to know right from wrong. I softened slightly, seeing real pain in her eyes. But young enough to be afraid of ending up like me. A tear slipped down her cheek. I missed you. The real you, not the sanitized dead sister they talked about at parties. For the first time, I felt my own composure crack. I missed you too. But I couldn't be who they wanted. I had to be myself. Ms. Martinez. A reporter's shout broke the moment. What happens to the Wilson family now? I turned back to the crowd, professional mask firmly in place. They'll retain their personal assets, those that aren't already legally mine, and receive fair compensation for their shares. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to save a company that lost its way. And the family relationships. I looked at my father, defeated on his own stage, my mother crying quietly in the crowd. Olivia, torn between the sister she'd lost and the parents she'd chosen. Some things, I said quietly, can't be fixed with money or business deals. The Wilsons declared their daughter dead rather than accept her choices. That doesn't go away just because she came back successful. The press conference wound down after that. Reporters got their sound bites, photographers got their shots of the prodigal daughter triumphant, and gradually the crowd dispersed. I stayed on stage, watching my parents huddle with their lawyers while Olivia hovered uncertainly between us. Maya appeared at my elbow. The papers are ready to sign. Private conference room. I nodded. Give me a minute. When the lobby was almost empty, I walked to where my parents stood. Up close, they looked old and tired, nothing like the towering figures of my childhood. The lawyers will explain everything, I said professionally. You'll be comfortable. The house is yours for life, the vacation properties too. I'm not interested in leaving you destitute. Just powerless, my father said bitterly. Like you left me? I smiled without warmth. The difference is, I'm giving you a choice. Sign the papers, accept a comfortable retirement, maybe even try to rebuild something resembling a real family relationship. Or fight me, lose everything, and prove that pride really is more important than blood. My mother reached for my hand. I let her take it, feeling her expensive rings press into my palm. We thought we were protecting you, she whispered. The business world, it's so hard for women. I pulled away. I know exactly how hard it is. I succeeded not because of the Wilson name, but because you forced me to fight without it. Olivia stepped forward. Elena, what about me? You're my sister, I said simply. My door is open when you're ready to know me as I am, not who they wanted me to be. I turned to go, then paused. Oh, and mother. The next time you're drunk at a party in my hotel, try not to brag about how you erased your daughter. It's bad for both our reputations. The paperwork took less than an hour. Signatures were scratched, hands were shaken, and just like that, Wilson Shipping belonged to the daughter they'd buried. The company would keep its name but nothing else. New board, new methods, new future. Later that night, I stood in my office watching the Wilson ships in the harbor. Soon they'd be repainted with the Phoenix Maritime logo, upgraded with modern technology, integrated into my larger transportation network. The Wilson legacy would live on, just not in the way my parents had imagined. Maya brought a bottle of champagne. To the merger. To the truth, I corrected, taking a glass. Sometimes it takes a death to bring it to life. Your sister's been calling, she said carefully, and your grandmother's compass. I touched the pendant. Grandma knew. She left me this compass the day before I disappeared, said sometimes the right path isn't the easy one. Smart woman. She would have loved seeing this. I sipped the champagne, remembering. She always said the Wilson pride would sink us faster than any storm. My phone buzzed. Olivia again. This time I answered. Can we talk? She asked quietly. Really talked, just us? I looked out at the harbor where the Wilson ships floated in darkness. Come over. It's time you saw who your sister really is. After I hung up, I asked Maya to order dinner for two. It would be a long night of explanations, of bridging the gap between the sister who died and the woman who rose from those ashes. But maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all this. I wasn't Elena Wilson anymore. That girl had died exactly as her parents claimed. But Elena Martinez was stronger, successful beyond their wildest fears, and finally, absolutely free. The merger would save their company. The money would save their lifestyle. But the truth, that would save me. And in the end, that's what the story was really about. Not revenge, not money, not even family. It was about a girl who had to die to become who she was always meant to be. I raised my glass to the dark harbor. To Elena Wilson, I whispered, may she rest in peace. Then I turned away from the window and went to meet my sister, ready to begin whatever came next.